Newsroom. Lo and behold, an April 10th deadline has passed. The bloodshed continues in Syria. Special Envoy Kofi Annan says Bashar al-Assad's armies pulled out in some places while deploying in others. Moscow is calling on Annan to up the pressure on Syria's armed insurgents, dashing any hope of consensus, in the short run at least, at the UN. So who can get anything done at this point? Well, with shots fired into Turkey Monday from across the border, all eyes now turning to Ankara. Ankara's prime minister, on a trip to China, hinted at the creation of a buffer zone. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, now with several irons in the fire, talking tough with Syria, while getting set to host crucial nuclear talks with Iran. A trip to Tehran's nemesis, Saudi Arabia, sandwiched within it all. This all before the end of the week. A full agenda for a nation that saddles Europe and Asia, a NATO member whose star power in the Muslim world could well be put to the test. Today in the France 24 debate, Turkey's next move. And joining us from the Turkish city of Antalya, France 24 correspondent Jasper Mortimer. He'll have the latest for us there. In Brussels, former Turkish diplomat Sinan Ugen, now with the Carnegie Endowment for Peace. Thanks for being with us. From Washington, Henry Barkey, who teaches at Lehigh University. Thank you for being with us. Rouzbeh Parsi of the European Institute for Strategic Studies. Welcome back to the France 24 debate. And Douglas Herbert, our international affairs editor of the France 24 debate, where you've been weighing in on the conversation today on Facebook and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrancoisF24. Before we focus on Turkey's next move, there's the shelling that's been continuing in cities throughout Syria on Tuesday. So, is all hope of a respite lost?
Still have time between now and the 12th to stop the violence. And I appeal to all concerned, the government in the first place and the opposition forces.
So the deadline pushed back to the 12th. Expectations low, though, among the Syrians who witnessed Kofi Annan tour their refugee camps.
We don't need Kofi Annan to come and see us here. We're not worried about food and drink. Kofi Annan needs to go to Homs, Idlib and Daraa and see the massacres. I came here from Idlib 2 days ago. Real massacres happened there.
Jasper Mortimer, not so sure there's no meaning in visiting those Turkish refugee camps. After all, we are one day after shooting from across the border into one of those camps.
Yes, Francois, look, the frustration that you heard in that clip now was commonly held by Syrian refugees across Turkey that I've met. All of them are saying that. And I heard that when he came to this camp behind me a few hours ago, the refugees gave him a raucous welcome. I was here. They were protesting and chanting. And when they got down close to him, they were actually saying, listen, we don't want any more promises. We either want the world to intervene or to give us guns so we can fight President Bashar Assad. And one person in this camp was so frustrated that he actually threw a sandal at Kofi Annan.
All right, so
interestingly, a couple of hours after Annan left, Senators John McCain and Joe Lieberman visited this camp, and they got a much warmer reception. Why? Because they do favor a US-led intervention in Syria.
All right, we'll be picking up on that point. Douglas Herbert, you're following this whole Syria story, and it'll be the topic of your focus segment later on. But just let me ask you, right now, the international community, is it beyond Kofi Annan's efforts and just squarely looking at Turkey?
No, well, the international community is defined as everyone but Russia and China. No, they're still very much on board. We were speaking to a French diplomat here last night who said still very much behind the Kofi Annan plan. Why, Francois? It's an open secret because most people, no matter what their reservations with it, a lot of diplomats will tell you it still is, for better or for worse, the only game in town. What we're seeing, though, is obviously so far the unworkability or the unviability of Kofi Annan's plan, because however diplomatic he's been, however great a consensus builder he can be, you could be the world's greatest diplomat, he's dealing with a very intractable situation, and you could see what he's up against right here. And yeah, you could put the onus directly on Bashar Assad, because it was his deadline today to get his tanks out of that town. The ceasefire applies to everyone, but that's 2 days later. What we've seen today, essentially, Francois, is, the initial deadline was for today. We were all talking about April 10th. Now we're all of a sudden talking about April 12th. Turkish politician today basically said April 10th is void, so Thursday becomes the new Tuesday. We're always saying red is the new black. Thursday is the new Tuesday. There's a new deadline. Push it back.
All right, the deadline pushed back. The welcome not so warm, as Jasper was telling us. Sinan Ulgen, you heard Jasper Mortimer tell us that there was a warmer welcome for those 2 U.S. senators who favor intervention. What kind of a welcome do you think that Turkey's prime minister would be getting in that camp today?
Well, I mean, when we look at what Turkey is trying to do on Syria, Turkey has been an outlier as a member of the international community. It has been much more hawkish. It has not refrained from calling the resignation of Assad. Even a few days ago, even after the international community gave it full support to the Annan plan. So definitely many of the Syrian refugees that are in Turkey are looking up to Erdogan to provide a magic solution to their problem. But this solution is certainly not, there is no quick fix. Erdogan is in the midst of a high-level diplomacy. He was in China. He's coming back to Turkey. He will be going to Saudi Arabia to try to build a coalition to put more pressure on Assad.
All right, so Erdogan working there with a lot of shuttle diplomacy. Henry Barkey, has he upped the tone significantly, would you say, since that shooting in that camp on Monday?
Well, Erdogan this morning, at least last night in China, basically said that this shooting was a grave incident. But still, there is some, they are leaving themselves some ambiguity because they don't want to be pushed into a position where they will have to take some kind of military action or be forced to take military action. If you look at some of the reports, it's very clear that some Turkish reports say that it wasn't very clear where the shooting came from. Maybe it was ricochet firing, etc. So, look, the Turks may be talking tough, but they really are very worried about any kind of military action that they would be forced to take on their own. So, at the moment, what they would like to see is for the rest of the world to be more proactive, to put more pressure on the Syrians, and they want to be the last in Turkish military intervention to be the last act, if you want, or the last possible thing to do. They're not anxious to go in.
By the way, it's not just Syrian refugees that are egging the Turks on. We asked you what Turkey should do on Twitter. Michael saying, well, hopefully show more balls than the rest of the world has. While Aubrey said to us, refugee camps are always vulnerable. Prior to taking any action towards Syria, Turkey must securitize refugee camps. Jasper Mortimer, how does it feel in respects to that one day again after that shooting?
Well, Francois, there's been new shooting at that same camp, Kilis, which is only a few hundred meters from the Syrian border in the past couple of hours. Nobody has been wounded, but again there was shooting. And this shows that Turkey made a big mistake by siting that refugee camp so close to the Syrian border. I believe that when the UNHCR erects refugee camps, they have guidelines saying that the camps must always be sited a certain distance away from the border of the country that the refugees can happen. I think they have a phrase like a reasonable distance to avoid incidents such as happened yesterday when 6 people were wounded, 2 of them being Turks, 4 being Syrian civilians, and tonight when nobody was wounded but there were bullets flying into that camp again.
Right, so the geography of it important. We're going to show the report that Jasper Mortimer and Asia Siab put together. First, let's show you those refugee camps. Again, an estimated 24,000 Syrians have crossed over since the fighting started 1 year ago. There you see the image of where all those camps are located, mostly there near the border between Syria and Turkey. When you look at where all those camps are, Ruzbe Parsi, and you think back to 1 year ago when it all began inside of Syria, was this all predictable?
Well, that you would have internally displaced persons, that is, refugees within the country itself, yes. And that they would try and reach borders, again, yes. So in that sense, it is predictable. The problem, I think, for the Turks and everyone else, of course, is that if you kind of say, don't do this because then this and this will happen, the problem is that you don't know where all of that is going to end up. That is, if the Turks, for instance, if this kind of shelling or shooting continues against the refugee camps and the Turks feel forced, if you will, to show a response, what will the counter-response be and where will you end up with that?
All right, and again, we were saying that Turkey dealing, it seems as well, with refugees that are coming in. As Jasper Mortimer was pointing out, one of those camps perhaps a little too close to the border for comfort, but there's also insurgents going out, as Jasper and Asia Siab discovered in this report.
Every day, wounded Syrians arrive at the hospitals of southern Turkey. This ward has 2 members of the Free Syrian Army from the town of Azaz in Aleppo province. One was shot by Syrian soldiers as he was driving towards a checkpoint. He managed to flee and get treatment in a field hospital.
Thank God we have these field hospitals. They are very basic, but they do help. I stayed in one for 3 days. They told me there was an escape route to Turkey. It was very dangerous. We had to look out for snipers all the time.
When he's recovered, he'll go back to Syria to fight with the Free Syrian Army. He said when he joined its northern Aleppo brigade 6 weeks ago, it had 1,300 men. A lot more wounded have arrived at the hospital in the past week, many shot by helicopter gunships. The Syrian military is waging an offensive ahead of the Annan Plan's deadline, a peace process that nobody here believes in.
The rebels will lay down their arms only if this plan brings an end to the killings. Bashar has had several opportunities for peace, and each time he's used them to kill more people.
For many of these young casualties, Turkey is only a rear base to regain their strength before going back to Syria.
All right, before we let you go, Jasper Mortimer, you conclude there saying Turkey only a rear base. Is that, how much does it seem from what you've witnessed there near the border with the consent of the authorities in Ankara?
Very much with the consent. You know, I believe the Syrian foreign minister, Walid Mualem, accused Turkey of being part of his country's problem and of undermining the peace process. He accused Turkey of hosting the Free Syrian Army, whom he referred to as terrorists. He accused Turkey of arming the Free Syrian Army, and he accused Turkey of allowing the Free Syrian Army to go back and forth. Well, I'll tell you what, the accusation of Turkey arming the Free Syrian Army is not true. Turkey has said that it is not giving them weapons. But Turkey is hosting the Free Syrian Army. The commander of the Free Syrian Army stays in a camp not far from here, along the border. Free Syrian Army fighters are allowed to stay in these camps. They're not camps run by the Red Kizilay, the Red Crescent. They're not refugee camps, but they are camps watched by the authorities. And people are allowed to cross over, FSA fighters, just as civilians are allowed to cross over. 2 days ago, I saw a group of about 20 civilians who, to my surprise, were walking back into Syria. Now, when I spoke to the refugees in the camp nearby, they said, yes, this happens all the time. Some Syrians bring their wives, elderly relatives, and children to a camp, and then they go back to Syria to look after their houses or to fight or to bring other people back.
Right.
So there is a lot of human traffic, both FSA fighters and normal civilians, back and forth.
All right, and all this flow with the consent of Ankara. Jasper Mortimer, thanks for joining us, and thanks for all of your reporting there at that border area. I want to get the reaction of Sinan Ulgen to what Jasper just said. The Syrian foreign minister, in fact, let's listen to the Syrian foreign minister. He was in Moscow this Tuesday, where he stressed the point that he believes that he didn't say the words Turkey, but you sort of felt it in his voice.
Also asked Kofi Annan to get in touch with the armed groups and with the countries that are supporting these armed groups, the countries which have publicly declared their support for providing these armed groups with more weapons.
So my question is, Sinan Ulgen, does the Syrian foreign minister have a point?
He doesn't. The Turkish position has been very clear. Turkey does indeed provide logistical support. It provides medical support, but not arms to the Free Syrian Army. Having said that, Turkey has also lobbied the international community, in particular when the Foreign Minister Davutoglu was in Washington 3 weeks ago talking to the US administration. He's had a 7-hour-long meeting with Secretary Clinton. Turkey lobbied the international community to provide arms to the Free Syrian Army. However, so far, that decision does not rest on Turkey alone. But if indeed the Annan plan fails, and there is every sign to think that it will, I have no doubt that this is going to be one of the issues that the Turkish Prime Minister will take up during his visit to Saudi Arabia.
By helping, though, by letting the commander of the Free Syrian Army in the area stay at that camp, is it not a rag to a Red Bull? Is this all calculated?
It is calculated. Turkey's red line so far has really been the supply of weapons to the Free Syrian Army. It has shied away from doing that. But short of that, it did provide its support. It has been hosting the commander of the Free Syrian Army for a number of months now and giving all sorts of logistical support, but again, not military support, no supply of arms to the Free Syrian Army as things stand.
And when we come back, we'll be asking Henry Barkey and Ruzbeh Parsi about how this fits in to the Turkish Prime Minister's overall foreign policy game plan. Stay with us.